Cool. What's up, everybody? Good morning. Thanks for joining Level Up uh, 2 here. Like Sam said, we're really excited to bring you a whole bunch of content today and basically kind of share knowledge and stuff around the bug hunting community. And it's a big passion of mine. And so Sam talked about our ambassador program a couple seconds ago, and the idea behind that ambassador program is really to spread this kind of training and goodwill for the bug hunter community across the world. And so I will be helping Sam lead up the ambassador program. We're going to have cool things like office hours, resume reviews, direct access to the team, obviously technical training that's very similar to what I'm going to show you right now for the bug hunters methodology. So we're really excited to bring you some of this cool stuff over the next year, and I'm glad that you guys are with us today. So any of you don't know who I am, my name is Jason. This is not a picture of me verbatim. This is my daughter in the upper right-hand corner here. Recently, we just attended our first CTF together. So I run the Santa Barbara OWASP CTF, which is a relatively small event, but took her to that event and she scored her first green box challenge, and she did a recon challenge with some Googling involved, and I was very proud of her, so I thought I'd throw a picture of her hacking up in here. She's a wonderful 7-year-old. So I am the VP of Trust and Security at BugCrowd. I am currently a researcher, and I was at one point the top researcher on the leaderboard. I'm also a huge nerd and gamer, so I play PUBG, Dota, and Fortnite currently. So if any of you game, this is actually my real Twitch ID that's in the chat right now. If you scroll up, you'll see I identified myself as DBan, so you can hit me up and maybe you can play some games. All right. So this talk is called the Bug Hunters Methodology. And really, this is the third iteration of the Bug Hunters Methodology. And what happens with this talk is like the first one I gave was at DEF CON. And it was actually the research done for it was before I even worked at BugCrowd. And the idea for the talk was basically to take all of the methods and the successful tools and mind share of the bug hunting community, and educate everybody else who was doing it and wanted to get into it. And so I made this presentation in I think it was 2014 or 2015, called the Bug Hunters Methodology. At DEF CON 23, it was called How to Shot Web. And then every year I have been, or every half a year, I have been iteratively updating it, right? Because like the methodology for bug hunting, or if you use this information for web application penetration testing or whatever you do, um, it changes so rapidly. The tools change, the methods change, the technologies change, and so really, I can usually fill a whole presentation with just like the new kind of stuff that I'm seeing in the last 6 months. And my process for this is pretty straightforward. I watch what the community does. I see what works for me in my bug hunting day to day. I bookmark it, I analyze it, and I basically bring it to you guys as quickly as possible. So there's been two iterations of this: the Bug Hunters Methodology, or How to Shot Web, at DEF CON 23, and then I released one called the Bug Hunters Methodology version 2.1 at NullCon and a couple of other small cons recently. This is version 3-ish, mostly because I feel like I'm getting away from the fact that I could probably fit any of this into one hour speaking slot. And so I'll talk a little bit about what the Bug Hunters methodology evolves into at the end of this presentation, and we can talk about that a little bit more. So if you're just getting into this, if you're just getting into bug hunting, what we recommend you start with are these resources. There's 5 resources that exist: the Web Application Hacker's Handbook, the OWASP Testing Guide, Web Hacking 101, Breaking into Information Security and Mastering the Modern Web Penetration Testing. All of these books are considered the basic building blocks for kind of starting into web hacking. The Web Application Hacker's Handbook being probably the most important out of all of them. And I get a lot of questions of like, aren't like some of these old, right? So the OWASP testing guide at this point, probably about 2 years old from its last release version. Web Application Hackers Handbook version 2 is relatively old at this point, even in its newest version. Some of these other books are newer. And what I tell people when they give me that comment is basically no. All the core content in the Web Application Hackers Handbook and the OWASP Testing Guide are the foundations of web application security, which is teaching you about how throwing bad input at applications can cause bad things, and going through the classes of vulnerabilities that we see in the space. And so, although they may not be up, for the newest framework or target that you're specifically hacking, the foundations in these books are really what gets you started as a web hacker. So these are what we suggest you start with when you get into bug bounty hunting. So the first thing that I usually talk about in these presentations is recon, or you can call it whatever you want. But in this one, I've broken down recon into a couple of different sections, because in each one there are specific tools, and so I just wanted to break it out a little bit for everybody to understand. So the first section in this version of the bug hunters methodology for the recon section is discovering IP space. So when you're going after a target, let's say that we're doing Tesla, right? What we want to do is identify both their hosts, but also their IP space, so that we have a good system, we have a good reference for how much they have out there on the internet. So there's a few resources that you can use to gather that type of information. Here is the most common one that people use to find an organization's basically autonomous system number, which is the IP ranges that they have registered. Here you can see that we're searching customer bug crowd Tesla Motors. We can search this site Hurricane Electric, bgp.he.net, and this will basically give us their registered IP space for Tesla Motors Inc. You can see it's a 209 address there on the right. This will give us a starting place for where to look for infrastructure and websites that they might own. This is also one of the only services that allows you to search by basically keyword. So if you don't know their AS number already, their autonomous system number, or you don't know exactly their what they registered as Tesla Motors or Tesla Inc. or whatever, it's one of the only sites that allows you to search by keyword, which here I just put in Tesla. So that's why a lot of people use this to get a good feel. You can see that multiple entities showed up in the search results, and we can drill down at each one of those until we find the right one. Interestingly enough, Tesla Engineering Group might also be related to Tesla, but not the same. The next place you want to go to look is the basic databases that you would probably use in like penetration testing land, which is ARIN and RIPE. These will have information about registered IPs and domains and everything to do with an organization. These are pretty standard when you're doing network penetration testing. You visit these types of resources to understand. They also have keyword searches to do whois lookups in their whois databases. So you can see that I'm searching for Tesla Motors here, and this will give me back some information about what infrastructure and whois that I have. Another one that I use is when I find a main domain. Obviously, when you start a bounty, you'll have probably at least one target, hopefully. And so TeslaMotors.com or Tesla.com would be something you could start with, and you could use this source, which is called reverse.report, and this will basically give you that domain, and then anything else related via a reverse lookup. So here I've searched TeslaMotors.com, and I found that TeslaMotors.com resides on this IP. There are other TeslaMotors.coms that reside on other IPs, and if I click into any one of those IPs here, or the ranges, I can see what else Reverse Report has basically cached for domain names inside of those ranges. So we can expand the new ranges that we find in order to find new domains to add to our scope if it's a wider scope bounty. There's also, of course, Shodan, which a lot of penetration testers and bug hunters are used to. So Shodan offers a keyword org colon here, and you can use org colon for finding sites that Shodan might have cached for your target. So here I searched org colon Tesla Motors, and this will start giving me some IPs and infrastructure that are related to Tesla Motors. Cool. So that's a little bit about finding like IP space and top level domains. What happens a lot is, in my favorite bounties in this space are definitely ones that have really wide scope, right? So we have several customers on BugCrowd who just say, if you can identify that it's our actual infrastructure, or it's something that we own, we want you to go hack it. And so these, to me, because I'm a recon head and I love the recon type finding of brands and hosts and stuff like that. This is actually one of the things that I really like the most. And so this section of recon and the section of the presentation is about finding new brands and top level domains. So previously, in previous versions of this talk, we talked about searching Wikipedia and Crunchbase for acquisitions, right? So when a company acquires another company, you immediately, as a bounty hunter, want to look in to see if that acquisition is in scope. There might not have been any update to the scope for the actual brief, but it's important to, as a bounty hunter, to understand and basically keep in the know about what's happening with your target. So the two best places to monitor acquisition still remain Wikipedia and Crunchbase. Because people use those two sites to trade on like stock information and stuff like that, they stay pretty up to date with news around the brand that you're looking at. Another way to branch out from maybe one domain that you have or one brand that you have is a method called link discovery. And it's not new. It's not like some super new tool, but it is pretty powerful. And I'm going to do a demo of how link discovery works using Burp Suite. And then also there's another method I've been using a lot lately, which is weighted link and reverse tracker analysis, which I'm going to go into in a couple slides with two tools. One which you probably already used, which is built with, and then another one called DOMLink. All right, so the general idea for finding acquisitions in Tesla, in this case, would just be to go to Crunchbase and Google Tesla, and then look at the acquisitions tab, right? We can see here that they've picked up a couple of companies over the years. That's actually, they actually have another one since the screenshot, but Grumman Engineering, Solar City, and Riviera Tool. Important to see if these are in scope for your testing. So that's one way. You could also go to Wikipedia for some of this information. It depends on which organization that you're looking at, but some of the Wikipedia entries will have full lists of brands that your target have and that they have acquired or they run as in different places in the world. For this instance, Tesla does not in their Wikipedia entry, so I didn't include a screenshot here. But this is where I would go for this one, which would be Crunchbase. So the next thing I do to find more brands or more top level domains that I want to enumerate is basically visiting the site itself. And so link discovery is this idea of going to a site and just seeing where it links out to. And so you can do this with a couple tools. I usually do it in Burp. But the general idea here is you visit the site in Burp, you set up a custom scope, and then you go ahead and walk and browse the site, and it will spider all the hosts recursively as you visit them, and it'll fill out your site tree in Burp, and it'll show you it'll basically show you anything that matches your keyword that you set in the scope. So we're going to go over a pre-recorded video because the demo gods are not great. We're going to show that right now. So this is one that I did on Tesla. And here you can see that I have Burp Suite on the left. And I have my target on the right, which is Tesla.com. And what I'm going to go ahead and start to do here is everything's set up to intercept. I'm going to go to the proxy tab. Actually, I'm going to go to the scanner tab. And the first thing I'm going to do is turn off passive scanning. I just don't want for this exercise. I don't want the passive scanner just generating a ton of results. It's going to take up a lot of memory because I'm going to be spidering a lot of sites. So I'm going to turn that off immediately when I start up Burp. So I'm going to set that to don't scan. Not Larry Lau. Guaranteed not Larry Lau. Then I'm going to go to the spider options. And what I'm going to do here is where it says application logins. This is one that I actually got a lot of feedback on. Is what to do when the spiders hit forms. Do you submit them? Do you not submit them? If they're a login form, what do you do? The forms that I usually have the most problem with. Sorry, let me pause that. Losing control of the video. There we go. Okay, cool. The forms that I usually have the most problems with are actually email generating forms. In pen testing or in the bug bounty world, you're kind of always worried about hitting a form that generates an email or sets up some kind of comment to the customer, right? Because if you hit that with automation and a spider like Burp is, you're just going to generate a billion emails for them, and they're never happy, and you feel bad, and everybody feels bad. But application logins I don't feel as bad for. So when Burp hits an application login normally for this method, I say just handle it as an ordinary form and use a general, the Winter at example.com, Peter Winter fill-in that it does in form submission. So I will do that here. In this example, I'm also submitting regular forms as well. So if there was an email generating form here, I would blast Tesla and they would probably get mad at me. And that's not the greatest thing. So you have to use your discretion when you're setting up the spider here in both the section that says form submission and application login. So make sure that you kind of make that judgment call on your own. If it's a relatively small client, the site doesn't have email generating forms, then you should be good to go. So after you set up the spider, I'm going to turn interception off, and I'm just going to go ahead and re-request tesla.com. And you can see on the left-hand side in my target tab in my sitemap, Tesla has started to fill up. But at this moment, I don't have any scope set up, right? I don't have anything set up to filter this list. This is just everything that's coming through Burp Suite for the proxy. So you can see that once I've requested tesla.com, I start to get a whole bunch of domains, Google Analytics, secured visits. If I have any browser extensions that generate traffic based on visiting a site, they will kick off probably at this point. And so my site tree will start to fill up pretty largely. Now to kick off this link discovery idea, what I want to do is I want to add a scope item here based on a keyword. And so to do that in Burp, you have to go to your target and then your scope tab, and you check the box that says use advanced scope control. And what I want to tell Burp to do is the scope that it shows me in the site tree or in the proxy, I want it to match a keyword. I don't care about it matching a strict domain. I want it just to match the keyword tesla.com. So here I'm going to put in where it says host or IP range. I'm just going to put in Tesla verbatim the word. And so this will set up basically a regex search in all of the URL content or the host content. And then I will say OK. And this will add that rule. And you have to do this under advanced scope control. If you do this without doing advanced scope control, it'll mess up the rule. And you're just going to say yes. And then now if we go back to our sitemap, as you do, and go to show only in scope items, it should only be showing domains that have the keyword Tesla in them, and they will only show in the site tree here. So now I want to spider Burp with Burp's programmatic spider, which will then start recursively visiting every link it finds, and it will only show me links that have Tesla in the URL. In the site tree as it finds them. So here I'm going to right click on, well, actually I'm going to visit some of the tabs inside of Tesla just manually. And you can see my site tree starting to build out. And I've discovered quite a few more hosts just by manually walking the site that have Tesla in them. And as this grows, we're doing good. So now after I finished manually walking the site, I'm going to right click on all the hosts that I found and choose Spider. So now this will set Burp's programmatic spider out to all of these, and it will spider them and any links that it sees that have Tesla in the domain, it will add to the site tree. So one thing that you can monitor kind of like how you're doing and how many requests you have left. If you go to the Spider tab, you'll see Spider is running, how many forums and requests you have queued, and everything like that. This video is truncated, so I clipped out how long this took. This process can take, doing link discovery can take about anywhere from like 5 to 25 minutes, depending. And then at the end here, you can see the original stuff that I spidered is highlighted in orange, and new stuff that I found that had Tesla in the host field somewhere is white. And so you can see I've found a whole bunch of other linked assets that might be related to Tesla. Now, this is useful when you use the keyword to find linked assets because not only are you getting verbatim Tesla sites, but you also are regexing based on the keyword. And so if there's third parties that they are using um, that they host a domain for on third parties, you'll usually always see them because Tesla is like a subdomain of them. So you can see towards the bottom, there's one called Tesla Energy Formstack.com. So they are most likely using Formstack to do something, and they have their own customized subdomain on Formstack. But we've managed to enumerate that because we just keyworded Tesla at all in the domains. So that's the idea behind link discovery. I find a lot of stuff doing this. With Burp's limited parsing of JavaScript as well, it'll follow links in JavaScript files. And so this is pretty useful for finding hosts. And I will take the results from this and start putting it into my data collection for hosts I want to include in my hunting, basically. All right, that's done. So that's link discovery. And if you hear my son in the background, he's running around like a madman. So apologies. So the next one after link discovery that I think is a cool idea, and forewarning here, it hasn't worked for me super well yet. I'm waiting for the moment when it does. But is this idea of recursively looking at reverse whois programmatically based on who registered a domain, and then creating a link between those domains and presenting me with information. So there's a tool that recently came out by Vincent Yu, and let's see if I can get rid of my bar down here. Kind of annoying. Toolbars. Get it to. There we go. Cool. Cool. So DOM-link will go ahead and take an assigned domain, and here in the example GIF that the author gives us, Vincent Yu, VIP.com, we'll go and do a whois lookup on VIP.com. And then from the whois information, based on the registrar and some other data, it will recursively look at anybody else who, or any other whois record that has the same information. And so this tool, DOM-link, does it programmatically. It hasn't worked super well for me yet, but I really like the idea, and I have some pen tester friends who say this is like really cool. So I included it here. Your mileage may vary with this. So DOM-link is kind of a cool idea. One of the other ones I'd explored in the past level ups for finding content, and this tool was actually just discussed for finding stack information for a site that you visit, is BuiltWith. BuiltWith is a company that basically manages Built with is a company that basically manages how websites are run and the analytics, and basically does a whole bunch of like fancy tracking around a domain and what technologies they're using. Um, and so they offer some free tools for your browser, basically a browser plugin that you can click and it'll show you a domain, and it'll show you what technologies they're using, ads and analytics, the types of server software, any frameworks that they use, etc. Now, I don't know if this is actually recently or if I've just been missing it for years, but uh, the built with plugin in the browser has some pretty cool features, and something that I was doing manually with Google, but now I'm using built with to do is basically linking together the relationship of a site based on its analytics trackers. So here you can see this is a screenshot on the very left of the built with browser plugin. And so if I click it, I get the technology kind of profiling, but there's a tab that says relationships. If you click that tab and built with, it'll tell you all of Twitch TV's analytics codes, basically that it used. Its new relics code, its Google ad analytics codes, etc. Then it will tell you any other domains that it's seen in its databases that use those same codes. So you can see related domains that might be related to your target. So you can use this, and then you can click on any one of those attributes, they call them, with the ad or analytics, um, and it'll take you to the built with page, and it'll give you a heat map, how related each domain is to the individual one, and a full listing of everything that's ever used that analytics tag. So this has been super cool for me finding sites that are related and in scope, but not explicitly listed. So built with is pretty cool. So this one's pretty new in the methodology. So other ones that you can do that I've had some success with are basically Google dorking for the trademark of the company, or the privacy policy link for the company. So here you would do a Google search for Tesla C 2016, Tesla C 2015, or whatever their common trademark is at the bottom of the page, and then in URL Tesla or Tesla.com to try to find other sites that might be related to your top level domain. So that's finding new brands and new top level domains in your kind of recon methodology. So uh, the next section is finding subdomains. So this is a big one. Is probably where a lot of you are used to doing your enumeration. Um, it's been the subject of a lot of tool development in the last year, and I'm really excited about that, honestly. Um, so the idea about finding subdomains, there's two main ways to find subdomains. There's subdomain scraping and subdomain brute forcing. And so in the one section, subdomain scraping, it's all about the sources. Like about I don't care about a tool if it doesn't have um, a comprehensive amount of sources, right? And by sources, it can be anything. You could be looking through a search engine for results to find a target subdomains. You could be looking through basically something like Robtext, which is a site that basically spiders the internet and technologies and keeps a database. You could be looking through an SSL certificate project. You could be looking through VirusTotal, which has links to domains of people uploading and parsing binaries. You could be looking at projects like the Wayback Machine, which archives web page. I mean, there's literally probably like 25 to 40 sources that you care about when you're doing this scraping. And so the tools that you want to use are the ones that have the right sources. And that can be executed relatively quickly. So before, in this area, we used to use a tool called Sublister. And Sublister was great for, up until recently. It was awesome, but recently there's been two new kind of tools that have taken over my recon methodology. And one of those is AMAS, written by Jeff Foley. So AMAS basically has up to 22 um, up to 22 sources that it parses from, and includes a ton of auxiliary features for a subdomain enumeration tool. So it can be found at github.com/Cathix. Um, it includes reverse DNS methods of looking up for a target. It will include permutation scanning. So in one of the previous presentations, we talked about this idea of when you see a naming nomenclature for a subdomain like dev1, you should also check for dev2. And so alt DNS by Nathaniel Wakeman and Shubs was a tool that we were using um, in our recon in a couple of the previous iterations of this presentation. Now this is included in the two tools that I'm showing today, which are AMAS, and then the next one is going to be SubFinder on the next slide. So just some quick instrumenting of AMAS via a bash script. So I make sure that I keep output. I've recently been told that AMAS now has an option to keep output, so I actually don't need to instrument a bash script to keep the output of my runs, but you can use that however you want. And here you can see just running it on netflix.com, we start to scrape all of those sources that we care about to pull back subdomain data on netflix.com here. So AMAS is the first one. SubFinder is the second one. So SubFinder is written by Iceman. You can find it at iceman543/subfinder on GitHub. This tool also contains most of the same sources that AMAS does. And it also includes some features that are superior with output. You can get JSON output. And it also includes a brute force section that uses multi-resolvers. And so we're going to talk a little bit about brute forcing in a second. But one of our favorite tools when we brute force instead of find scrape is mass DNS, because mass DNS uses multiple resolvers when we're trying to resolve domains. Now, the author, Iceman of SubFinder, has tried to basically integrate everything that you would want in a subdomain finding tool, whether it be scraping or bruting, into one tool. So he's built a multi-resolver brute force section of SubFinder, which is amazing. So both of these tools are super sick. They have completely taken over any of the tools that I use, including ones that I've written myself. I am not too proud to use what is the best, honestly. And so SubFinder is the one that SubFinder is one of the ones you're going to want to add to your recon methodology. So usually at this point, I have a slide that says like what tool's better and like what sources do you need. But at this point in the game of recon, there's only two that are really relevant: SubFinder and AMAS. And so why not just use both? They both offer great output. You can script them together on the command line. They run really quickly, enough that I didn't want to make a slide here comparing like the milliseconds of they run. AMAS can run a little bit longer if you include the permutation scanning. It can take a little bit longer to run than SubFinder, but not too long that it's imperative or impacting your workflow when you're trying to find subdomains via these scraping methods. So just use both. Like there doesn't need to be a comparison here. Things I don't use anymore that you should eliminate from your recon kind of finding: enamall or recon-ng. That was my tool, and recon-ng is it was a wrapper around recon-ng. The sources are just not there. Between SubFinder and AMAS, they cover about 30 sources. The output is comparable, so what I would do is script them together. What I do is I script them together and then sort and unique the output. I don't use Aquatone. A lot of people come up to me and ask me why I don't use Aquatone. The sources are not great in Aquatone. Sorry, guys. There's just not enough sources for that tool. The thing that's great about Aquatone is that it instruments a workflow that is nice. So Aquatone is a framework around finding subdomains. And so it has sections kind of like Metasploit or like a Metasploit plugin, or it has different plugins to do different things. So the Aquatone Discover tool is the one that is parsing all of these sources on the internet for subdomains. And it just does not have the same amount of sources or extensibility that AMAS or SubFinder has. Aquatone Scan, however, is the next section in Aquatone's kind of workflow. And what it'll do is then it'll take everything that is found, it will port scan it, and give you more information that is somewhat useful. So you don't have to script that yourself. Aquatone scan, that module is somewhat useful in this workflow. And there's other modules in Aquatone that also could be useful. But for finding subdomains, not the best. Sublister, pretty much depreciated at this point, even though there's some good forks out there. In the last version of this talk talked about Sublister and the forks that were being maintained. I have completely supplanted Sublister with AMAS and Subfinder. Really anything else for scraping I'm not using. One of the ones I do still think is interesting because I don't understand the black magic behind how it works is the Cloudflare enum tool, which still works. I don't use it in my workflow anymore, but basically when you go to register Cloudflare on a domain, they run some fancy magic from the Cloudflare databases and they tell you these are all of the subdomains and records, DNS records we could find for you that you could set Cloudflare up on. Do you want to set Cloudflare up on? So you register an account and you go put in your target's domain and it will tell you everything that Cloudflare knows about your target in this case. And so I'm not sure behind the scenes, behind the curtain, how they're doing it, and if there's any sources in there that are better than anything that's in AMAS or Subfinder, but I don't think so. I think that adding another tool at this point between AMAS and Subfinder is just reducing, small fractions. So I think that for all of your subdomain scraping needs, AMAS and Subfinder are what you're going to want to use. So that's scraping for subdomains. So now you have a list of subdomains that were referenced somewhere online, basically. The other method for finding subdomains is subdomain brute forcing. And this is the idea of basically just trying to resolve admin.tesla.com or admin.twitch.com, twitchtv.com, sorry, or twitch.tv. And just seeing if something resolves for that word in the subdomain. So you basically get a giant dictionary of words that could be subdomains, and you try to resolve it for your target twitch.tv or tesla.com. Now, in the past, there used to be a whole bunch of tools for this. Fierce is probably one of the ones you've used. There are other ones, Black Sheep Wall, DNS Parallel Prober. These have all been pretty much supplanted by MassDNS. The reason that all these other tools have been supplanted by MassDNS is because MassDNS basically breaks up your giant list of stuff you want to try to resolve, breaks it up into small pieces and assigns each one of those pieces to a different DNS resolver. And so in parallel, and because it's written in C, it can run a 1,000,000-line dictionary for brute forcing in about 1.5 minutes, basically. Nobody uses knock py anymore. Sorry, it's just slow, not great. MassDNS is the way to go. Use it once and you'll love it. I guarantee you. So one of the things I put up in the corner here is Subfinder also instruments the same idea of breaking up the requests into multiple resolvers. I haven't used Subfinder for DNS brute forcing yet. So although I've used it extensively for scraping, I haven't used it for brute forcing. It might be just as good as MassDNS. And with the extensibility that it offers in the tool in general, it might be better, but I haven't tested it yet. So I would suggest basically trying either the Subfinder's brute forcing or MassDNS's brute forcing. And as a secondary GoBuster also, if you're looking for a non-multi-resolver subdomain brute forcing tool, GoBuster is the best one that is a non-multi-resolver one. So with this method of subbruting or subdomain brute forcing, you need a good list of subdomains to brute force from. And so I went out to all of the tools that existed for this in the last 12 years in pen testing and bug bounty hunting for their word lists, and I just put them all into one file. So this is all.txt. It contains content from Bluto, Deep Magic, DNS Scans, Fierce, DNS Enum, Bitquark's DNS subdomain research, Subbrute, Knock, Reverse Raider, and ReconNG and Nmap's list of default subdomains. So All of this is catted into one list. It runs pretty fast with a multi-resolving DNS brute force tool like Mass DNS. And so you probably want to use this. I use this in my day-to-day. The one project I hadn't at the last point of this presentation really looked into was common speak in the scans.io data. So Nafi and Shubs, two pretty prolific bounty hunters, people I respect a lot, built built a parser with BigQuery to parse sites and pull out URL paths and also subdomains it saw in certain sites. So Hacker News, HTTP Archive, and Stack Overflow and CTL data were areas that they focused on. So they went through basically all the pages, and anytime they saw a subdomain, they would add it to a list. And anytime they saw a URL path, they would add it to a list, and then they would sort somehow those those results, and then they included them in a GitHub repository for people to use for this. So basically, Common Speak is awesome for the subdomain data. I use the subdomain data, and I'm going to add it to that all.txt gist or post a new gist because the subdomain data is really useful. The URL data for me when I get to content discovery has been less useful. I don't know why, but if you manually start parsing through some of what Common Speak looks for and what it parsed out of these projects, it's very application specific. And it's not the kind of stuff that I want to focus on for content discovery for URLs. So I use Common Speak and Scans.io data for subdomain data, but not the URL data. Some other methods of finding subdomains. So last Level Up, we had a presentation called Esoteric Subdomain Enumeration Techniques by Bharath. And he talked about using DNSSEC parsers and NSEC parsers and doing what's called NSEC walking or DNSSEC walking using several utilities to kind of do the same functions that an old zone transfer used to do for you if you have DNSSEC set up. So there's a whole presentation on these esoteric subdomain enumeration techniques linked in his presentation from last year. Finding subdomains, you can also find subdomains in GitHub, doing GitHub recon. You can do some Google dorking. There are other presentations around that. Ben Sadigpour Nahamsek did one last year as well for a GitHub recon and stuff like that. So I recommend if you want to dive into each one of those subjects, you could probably look into those presentations and get some good ideas for looking at those sources. All right, so we've found subdomains, right? We found some top level domains and maybe some brands, and we found a whole bunch of subdomains. Now, what do we start doing when we get down to individual sites? The first thing we want to do is basically port scan sites, right? And so anytime that you mention port scanning, obviously Nmap comes up, pretty common tool. What I found is that Nmap for any large port scan it will just take forever, right? So if I have an ASN that I pulled from the first section of this methodology, that is a lot of hosts, doing a full port scan on all of those hosts will take forever. So MassScan is a tool written by Robert Graham. It is the fastest port scan. Sam, could you mute your mic? Sorry, buddy. Sam. Okay, cool. So MassScan will do port scanning at a much faster rate than anything else. The problem with MassScan is it won't take DNS names. It will only take IPs. So a small shell script to basically run a dig on a domain. It'll also strip out a HTTP or HTTPS prefix if you're pulling it out of another tool, and then running MassScan against that is included in the snippet below. So I use this to do MassScan against either a named domain or or against an IP range. And so I'll start to port scan all of my targets. Obviously, you're interested in things that have web ports, but there's a ton of other ports that you want to enumerate as well. Yeah, you are not muted. No worries. There we go. Cool. Um, so starting to do port scanning across your targets. So once you start doing port scanning across your targets, there's a number of ports that are going to become interesting to you, right? So you're going to have things like FTP or SSH or remote administration protocols that you see in your port scans. And although your bounty is most likely focused on web, those things are still associated to the servers, and if they're vulnerable to either credential brute force or some overflow in the software, you definitely want to call them out. So Brute Spray is a tool I've been using lately to take the output of masscan. Anytime it finds masscan will basically give you an mmap formatted format if you use the slash the tick OG output flag, and it'll take your masscan results and put it into an nmap format. And then you can take that nmap format and rescan it with version scanning from nmap, and output the format again, and then pass it to Brute Spray, which whenever it encounters one of those remote administration protocols, like FTP, SSH, there's a ton. It'll brute force SQL, MySQL, and MS SQL. It will use a small word list to try to brute force those hosts with common passwords or default passwords or anonymous logins. So this is a tool that I'll start using across remote administration protocols when doing bounty hunting. This is what that looks like. So basically, I've taken an nmap scan file, or this is actually one that the author did, and basically you can see that the nmap output file had several hosts with FTP, SMTP, SSH, Telnet, and MySQL. And so it's parsing all of those. It's using a word list, and it's going out and brute forcing. The core brute forcing module in this is Medusa, and so it's using Medusa to basically brute force all of these hosts. And so at the end, you'll get a file that says, if you successfully brute forced a certain host and what credentials were used to do that. And this is good at instrumenting across a whole large set of domains. Okay, so we have a ton of top-level domains, and for those top-level domains, we might have enumerated a whole bunch of subdomains. But we've scraped these off of the internet, off of multiple sources, and the problem with that is they might not be up anymore. We also have references to them in a format that doesn't tell us what protocol they use, either HTTP or HTTPS. Now we can port scan all of them for 80 and 443 and add the protocol. But to bypass that step and kind of get a good feel around what each site is, I use a tool called Eyewitness. So Eyewitness will take a list of domains without a protocol, HTTP or HTTPS, and it will visit each one with a headless browser and take a screenshot of what it sees, and then dump them to a report. And what this will allow me to do is basically go into a folder with a whole bunch of screenshots and see, okay, what domains are actually redirecting to the same app, what domains are interesting to me to go hack first, things that might have been left out there on the internet. So the reason I use Eyewitness over something like Aquatone or HTTP Screenshot is because it has this function to try both protocols, basically. So I don't have to do the port scanning in this section of my methodology. I can just add this flag called prepend HTTPS, or I think it's just -- prepend, and it will try prepend HTTPS, sorry, and it will try for every subdomain that I have in a list, auth.tesla.com or autodiscover comparison. It will try both HTTP and HTTPS. Therefore, I don't have to port scan in this section yet off of a list of domains. So I can take the output directly from Sublister and AMAS, dump it into Eyewitness, and begin getting screenshots of targets I might want to look at. Now, um, this isn't foolproof, right? Uh, the headless browser technology that we're using here um, doesn't always resolve. There's timeout issues. There's just, sometimes it just doesn't work. So for a large target, when I'm doing this, I will use Eyewitness. When it's small and I only have a list of about 20 hosts, I'll just load those up into the browser. Honestly, I'll use some quick sed or awk magic to add HTTP and HTTPS to every subdomain that comes out of those tools, and then I'll just dump it into a browser and open them using the command line, and then deal with the memory hog that Chrome is. So I will do that, and you'll notice I'm pausing every second because I'm seeing your questions in Twitch, so I'll try to address them. So when I'm looking at this visual identification, right, I know what the main site of Tesla.com looks like. So anything that redirects to the main site, I'm not really paying attention to that. Anything that presents me immediately with like their help portal or anything like that, not super interested in that. Don't really care about their OWA portal, their email portal, because those are usually pretty hardened out of the box. Not to say they always are, but most of the time they are. But anything that looks like a custom application that is not their main website are things that I'm going to key on, because I know that they have probably spent less time with security on those sites than the main domain, and I'll probably be more successful focusing my time on those sites. So when I'm in that folder looking at the screenshots, that's kind of what I'll look for. And for services that are not running on 80 or 443, that's where the port scanning comes into play with MassScan, and the service scanning with Nmap. If I find non-standard web ports, there's a list of about 20 of them that are very common non-standard web ports. I can add those and check them out. And I think that I can actually edit the Eyewitness configuration file to add hosts or ports to the end of the domain. So I'm pretty sure that's an option that you can do with Eyewitness. HTTP screenshot is another method to get screenshots, and Aquatone also offers a screenshotting function in one portion of its methodology. But at this point, it's just adding another tool that doesn't do the prepending of the protocol at this point. So I don't use that when I'm doing this visual identification section. This can be slow. It can take a while, right? Like I said, if your scope is relatively small, there's a plugin that I use just in Chrome called OpenList, I believe, and I can just dump URLs into there and open multiple tabs and just instrument this visual part faster than I can using Eyewitness. But if your scope is relatively large and you have lots of hosts that you need to take screenshots of, using an automation is probably the way to go. Okay, cool. So one of the things that won me some bounties recently is basically I found a couple sites that were basic off when I visited them, right? Or 401, 403. And the domains themselves looked really interesting, like config, or like like basically things that, you know, looking at the subdomain name, I inferred that there might be juicy content, or at some time there should have been juicy content on that host. And so one of the things I did is extensively used archive.org and its way back function to look at entries for those domains, and basically see what they held in the past. And so one of them on the very front page had configuration information for a server. When at this point in time, that was basic off. You needed a username and password to get in, but in the past, it was cached by Wayback. So there are ways where you can go over a URL or a domain and search out all of its Wayback entries to see what used to be on that host before it was locked down. And so a couple of those are Wayback Unifier, ReconCat has one, but Tom Nom Nom's Wayback URLs is probably the one I use the most. to do this analysis for pulling one domain's archive.org history. And Brett Bauerhouse is a pretty prolific bug hunter, and he validated my tweet here saying that he's found some cool stuff using this method as well. So not just me. Add this to kind of your identification when you start getting subdomains from AMAS and Subfinder that look juicy but maybe didn't resolve, um, or you visit a subdomain and it's 401, 403, or basic auth or something that looked interesting. Go to the archive.org, see if there's anything for that host. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about basically, a lot of enumeration and recon for a target. And so when I'm doing this work, and I do quite a bit manually and some of it automatedly, I'm ending up with a lot of artifacts from a lot of tools, a lot of output, and it's really hard to track a large scope bounty well. So what I do for me personally, and it doesn't work for everybody, but this is what I do personally, is I use Xmind and mind mapping to basically track all of my tool usage and track progress across a given bounty. So here you can see Xmind is open. Xmind is a mind map program. It runs as a desktop app, and I'll show you an example of this in a second. But I start off with the main node is just the bounty name. So here we have Twitch. And then I give several nodes off of that, which is in scope, out of scope, and then notes and templates. And if you drill down into each one of these, I have in scope top level domains here. So twitch.tv is the main, obviously, for Twitch. Under twitch.tv, I have the raw output of several of the tools that we've talked about: link discovery, AMAS, Subfinder, and Mass DNS. So if you drill down into each one of those, it has the raw tool output that I keep stored in Xmind, so that I can always go back to it if I need it. And I don't need to dig through my command line history or even my logs. Then if you drill down under twitch.tv as a top level domain, I have the actual site that I'm looking at, which is www.twitchtv.com, https www.twitch.tv. And under any given site is a section for stack information, content discovery output, the port scan, all a listing of dynamic parameters or URLs, which I get from Burp Suite, and then interesting content types or functions that I want to look at later. A lot of people instrument Burp's highlighting to keep track of a lot of this stuff, or Burp's inline tools. I find it historically, for me, keeping it inside something like this while I'm going through each site to hack is super useful. So here you can see on affiliate.twitch.tv, I have the stack information from built with, and then I'll add my content discovery, my ports, and everything. And then once I find a vulnerability, I'll add that under a vuln section. Now, there's no template for this. You can build this yourself in twitch.tv or in an Xmind, but it just helps you keep track of all your information. And so I have some bounties that I work on that are super large in scope, and this thing is giant, and it helps me keep track of what I've done so far, so I don't ever repeat work, and I have everything kind of logged, and I know where I am in a project. And in a large project, that can get overwhelming. You can get analysis paralysis when you have this much recon going on, right? Like let's say you found, I had a bounty this year that had upwards of 5,000 hosts. This is live hosts for the company, right? And so you can look at that and just immediately kind of feel crushed and don't know where to start. And any good person, or the saying goes, how do you eat an elephant? It's just one bite at a time. And this is my version of one bite at a time. Everything's listed under a top level domain. Every site that's live gets its own entry, and every entry gets a certain level of testing. And all my tool output is tracked under each node. So on these, I usually use some highlighting to indicate certain things. Green means I highlight a section green if it's complete, if the tool run is complete or the section is complete. Orange means I'm in progress. Normally, running some tools and content discovery takes some time. And so if that's going to take some time to run on a certain host because it's rate limiting you or something like that, I want to move on to the next host pretty quickly. So I mark it as orange, saying it's in progress, and I come back to it later when my tool's complete. And then red means something in it was vulnerable, so I can come back later and find all my findings. Here is an example of this, if I can find it. Or here's an example of just the Twitch one. So this is an example of the Twitch run right now. Same thing you saw in the screenshot, right? So I have affiliate, I have stack. This subsection right here will fill out with many sites, many live sites. And so I'll just collapse them as I finish them. The raw data for tools on this top level domain, I can just collapse that. I also keep notes and templates for each domain here. So I keep markdown templates for all of my common findings. Cross-site scripting, pretty common vuln. You'll also notice that as you do a large scope bounty, you'll find the same vuln across multiple hosts. So once you write it up, you don't want to write it again. So I keep markdown templates in this specific project for this specific customer. And then I just also keep notes in here just to be like, yo, this thing's protected by Akamai WAF. Don't get your house banned from the internet, which is a thing that happens, or just random notes about a project here. And then also I keep stuff like out of scope in this list, so I just know not to go through it. So this is how I keep track of an organization, somewhat manual, but visually and workflow wise, it works really well for me when I'm doing large scope assessments and I have this much recon going on. Cool. Give me one second. Okay. All right. So now that you have lists of sites that you're actually touching, right? You're doing some port scanning, you're actually visiting them, and you're focusing on individual sites. There's several things that you want to do with each one of these. So built with was one we've talked about already. It does stack information profiling. Wapalizer is very similar to built with. It can be instrumented on the command line. So if you wanted to run it across a list of URLs, you can actually instrument it via command line. Retire.js is another one that's been mentioned in previous presentations, and I kept it here because it's super powerful. Retire.js will go out to a site, look at all of its libraries, and tell you if they're out of date from the newest current version, and then tell you any associated vulnerabilities between that delta version. Now, one of the ones I really like right now is vulners.com. It's netted me a couple CVEs that were like really easy to find. It's a burp plugin that you install. And this is from one of the previous presentations, but I included it still because it's still really relevant. And what it'll do is every time it sees a server header that tells the server version number, or it finds a README file that has a version number. There's multiple ways it can try to find the version number of the framework or web server. It will then alert you and say, because this version is X, it will tell you all the CVEs associated to that version. And so it's very similar to retire.js. It's for retire.js, it's just for JS. This is for server software, WordPress installs, basically anything it can pull a version for, it'll tell you about here. So Burt Vulner Scanner is pretty good. One of the things here is that it is the more extensions you add into Burp Suite, the more memory hog it becomes. You need kind of a powerful machine when you start adding a lot of extensions. So just be aware of that when you have a large recon bounty and you're doing this. It will take up a lot of memory to instrument tools like this. So just be forewarned. Okay, so one of the things about when you find or when you start diving into sites is, and you'll notice in automation, is that automation in general does not handle JavaScript very well, and does not handle parsing JavaScript very well or executing JavaScript very well. And so manually you could test every single site, right? But I'm a big fan of automation in certain areas, and you need it you need it to basically instrument and pull paths from everything. You're not going to be able to, as a human, even for one enterprise level site, you're not going to be able to parse every JavaScript file by hand or be able to like look at it and pull all the links out of it. That's just crazy, right? And so what what you end up having to do is instrumenting a couple tools. A lot of people will assume that burp will just automatically parse JavaScript files and relative paths and everything like that, and be able to execute all JavaScript when it finds it off the bat. And that's actually not 100% true. Burp is very good at doing these things when you're using Burp Suite to test for these sites. But there are some tools that are better, arguably, than Burp that you can add to your tool chain for heavy JavaScript sites. So one is Zap's Ajax Spider. Basically, if you switch to Zap instead of Burp, there's a plugin called Ajax Spider Site. It instruments a full browser um, to basically execute a page. So if it's heavily using JavaScript, you can spider the site with a headless browser, basically, which does a better job of being able to execute a whole bunch of stuff in a very dynamic site. Um, the other issue is this helps with spidering and getting like basically functionality and dynamic JavaScript pages executed. The other one that we want to do is we also want to find URLs inside of JavaScript files. So these are things like full URLs, absolute URLs, relative URLs, everything that you can find inside of a JavaScript file that's referenced. You also, you want to visit at some point, and um, you want to eventually test, right? And so a lot of people have been really successful in bounties by looking at JavaScript files and parsing them somehow to and parsing them somehow and visiting those URLs where they would have not have seen those if they hadn't used a method like this. So Link Finder is one of the tools that is in the community to do this. The link is actually at the end of the presentation. But what Link Finder will do is it'll go through um, JavaScript files, and it will pull out it'll build URLs out of absolute URLs, relative URLs, and different formats of each of those, so that you can then go visit them. So you can see some examples here where, in JavaScript, you might have like return/notifications or building a URL with URL : / plus something plus /. All of these things it will parse and build into full URL so you can visit these pages inside of your application testing to get a full scope of all the links in a site to actually test. So this is super useful for sites that are heavy with JavaScript. Another one is JS Parser, which does kind of the same thing. I think a little bit less well than Link Finder, but is also an option to do this JavaScript parsing for links. Super useful. And then how do you feed these tools? Basically, when you're in Burp, you can go to any domain in the site tree, and if you right click on it, you can go to engagement tools. You'll need the pro version of Burp. And inside of engagement tools, find scripts. And then once that box pops up that says find scripts, you click search, and that'll find all references to JavaScript at all and all scripts. And then you can copy those selected URLs, select all of those, and then copy all the selected URLs, and then pass them to one of these JavaScript tools. And then it will then parse each one of those URLs and pull out the URL links for you to visit. So if any of your sites use heavy JavaScript, or really you should probably do this anyway. If you talk to people like Brett Bauerhaus and you look at probably my history of finding bugs, a lot of good bugs have been missed by not parsing JavaScript files correctly because links were built in so many different ways. So this is super useful for finding endpoints that are not even really hidden, but important to test. All right, so talked about JavaScript. We talked about kind of organizing your methodology and stuff. So now we move on to the idea of content discovery. Let's see how I'm Do it on time here. Semi over? I might be over. Okay. So content discovery is the idea of brute forcing URL paths. This hasn't changed from previous versions. GoBuster is still the tool I use here because it's written in Go. It's super fast and it has some extensibility options. Really, the discussion around content discovery and what to use for it is what list do you use? I use robots, a combination of robots disallowed and robots.txt. There was some shade thrown in another presentation about using scans.io data um, or other lists. The problem with everything else I've seen is the robots.txt, the robots disallowed project and then the raft lists, which are other lists that people use for this content discovery, they focus on one area, and basically those projects went out and basically parsed all the robots.txt files on the internet, and they parsed those files and then sorted them by occurrence of files and paths that people didn't want you to visit. They didn't want spiders to visit. That's kind of the point of the robots.txt file, right? And then put them into a list so that we could brute force them and find them. The scans.io data that everyone kind of said to use basically goes to every website for anywhere and gives you occurrences of files and paths of just the general site itself. So it's not stuff that people didn't want you to find. It's just occurrence of URLs. That's not as useful for me as a pen tester, so I don't use it. Or a bug finder, right? I still use the Raft and robots disallowed lists. Um, I have found I have found so many bugs just using those lists. So like even though they're old, a lot of people be like, ah, yeah, it's like 7 years old or 8 years old or something like that. Still really useful. Don't judge a tool or a list by its whatever. I've combined the RAF lists, a couple of my own custom lists, and the robots disallowed list into this gist. So if you want to grab it and use it, it has a whole bunch of stuff in it. I'm still iterating on it. It's got some non-US language stuff in there, some meta character stuff in there that I haven't pruned out yet, but it is really useful. This is what I'm using to do my uh, discovery brute force, or content discovery and directory brute forcing. It includes both files and URL path, and I instrument it with GoBuster. In the last one, we talked a little bit in the last bug bounty methodology. We talked a little about parameter brute forcing when you have a script and you don't know what parameters it takes, and inferring maybe through some automation how you can tell which parameters are there. Parameth is the tool that I'll use to do that if I have a script but no parameters referenced anywhere, how to pass data to it. So this is the whole recon methodology, and I'm going to blast through some of the other stuff. So usually I go over common vulnerabilities and advents in each vulnerability section. So two things to look out for in the XSS world. Not a lot changes there really, but two frameworks that are super useful. One is BXSS and the other is EasyXSS. These are two relatively new entrants into the field of frameworks that allow you to instrument blind cross-site scripting attacks. I really like BXSS because I like the guy who writes it, and it has SMS support. So if you give it a PagerDuty, or I forget what API it uses, but some API, it will text you when it finds, or when your blind XSS attack triggered. So these are two ones you might want to look into if you're doing blind XSS attacks. For server-side request forgery, nothing new about the method of testing there from the last presentation, but when testing against a cloud environment, what do you look for as far as sites when you have an SSRF into a cloud environment? So this takes all the cloud providers, AWS, Google Cloud, Google, Pocket Cloud, Azure, OpenStack, et cetera, and it gives you URLs to their internal metadata services and kind of what you can get from each one of them. This list is open on GitHub. I cloned it and added to it from a guy named Buffalo Will, and it's super useful for SSRF testing. IDOR, everybody knows how IDOR works really, but it's still one of the most common bug classes that I see across bug crowd, as far as both occurrence and severity. So just make sure you're paying attention to all numeric IDs that pass in the URL, anything that looks like a hash or anything that looks like an email, and you're trying to change it to something else so that you can get access to somebody else's account. Okay, we're gonna go through a little bit of this. So subdomain takeover. This is Franz's kind of advent. He contributed this to the bug bounty scene pretty quickly. Advents here is really a project called Can I Take Over XYZ? This is done by Ed Overflow. It's an amazing project where he's documented every service, and if it's possible to do a subdomain takeover off of every service. It's not just Ed. Some other people contributed as well, like the whole community for Bug Bounty contributed. And it tells you like what the fingerprint is, what the site says when there is no service registered, and then a little bit about how to do each takeover. So can I take over XYZ? Super cool to get spun up on subdomain takeover. So AWS robbing, basically, if you find S3 buckets and you want to take them over, I have switched to using S3 Scanner. It allows you to give a file with sources of both the full URL, the bucket region, just a domain name or a bucket name. So I can, if I find any of those, I can throw them into a file and run S3 Scanner on it, or even a keyword. And so try to find open buckets related to a company that I might be hacking. We're going to blow through. This is, I will give these slides out. But this is, oops, sorry. I don't actually see the modal. Oh, okay. Okay. Once again, I've run out of time. Sorry, guys. So I did a recording for this part of the section at NullCon, and this is basically when you're facing Akamai or Cloudflare, which seem to be the two predominant WAFs that a lot of people are switching to, ways to bypass them. Not really fancy ways of like encoding traffic or anything, but just finding the origins and commonly named origins. And so this has actually been a pain in my life. I am sure that you guys have hit it in your bug bounty hunting. You'll just get banned by one of these two services, and then your house gets mad because they can't visit Southwest or any type of airline place. So, and then ways to basically other canonical ways to bypass stuff. So, when you have a WAF blocking you on domain.com, target.com, www.target.com, try dev, try stage, try www1, and try regionalized domains. Because even though they might be serving the same app, the WAF might not be configured to protect those domains. So I had a test recently where I had a WAF blocking me and then was able to switch to www2 and then was able to complete the injection without the WAF bothering me. So the future of the bug hunters methodology. So I've referenced a lot of stuff in the old presentations that you now know about, kind of, but I had to rush through it. There's 2 versions, maybe 3 versions floating out there. There's still a whole bunch of stuff I need to parse in. So what happens to the bug hunters methodology going forward? I can't run over like this all the time. I'm already over time, right? So this is the future of the bug hunters methodology. Which is called Bug Crowd University. And I'm really, really excited about this. I am building, along with people at Bug Crowd, a whole new training course, basically taking the information in all 3 of the Bug Hunters methodology slides and then adding some new topics. And I'm going to be releasing an open source training curriculum for each one of these bug classes. So we've already started developing this. The way that we've focused on content is we'll be doing content basically every quarter. We'll be releasing new content. What we're starting with is 2 sections. One section to bring an intermediate tester up to finding P1 level bugs, and another section to take new testers who may be students or have never done application assessment before and get them into kind of the intermediate crowd getting some P3, P2 bugs. So what we did is we ran data analysis across what type of bugs those are and what type of topics those are. We sent out some surveys. So the initial topics are going to be an introduction to how this training course works, what makes a good submission, asset discovery, which we've covered a lot of in this, and then an introduction to Burp Suite. Then the intermediate to advanced ones are going to be server-side request forgery, XML internal entity injection, security misconfiguration vulns, which are Git, AWS, and subdomain takeovers, and then IDORs and missing function level access control bugs. These are the ones that we see are like super hunters, we call them, the people who are hitting P1s all the time. These are the type of bugs that they submit most often that get paid out really high. So we want to bring the skill level of everybody up to that. And then we want to bring new people into the industry who can get into application assessment really quickly. So this is going to be coming out at the end of this quarter, Bug Crowd University. It's going to launch along with our ambassador program. This is the content that Sam was talking about. So what I want to be able for you guys to do is to take the Bug University, Bug Crowd University content, these slide decks and these videos, and get good at them. And it's open source. Contribute to them yourself. And then once you do that, take it out into your local Ruby meetups or DEF CON meetups or the Null meetups or wherever you are, and be able to present these as part of the Bug Crowd Ambassador program. I basically want everybody to get into bug hunting. I'm a bug hunter myself. I want everybody to have this freedom and make money and basically join this community that we have and get better. And I want to learn from you guys. So this is the brainchild of Sam and I and Casey, and we've been wanting to do this for a long time. And so this is coming out at the end of the quarter. So I'm super excited about it, and I'll need your guys' help. So hit me up via the ambassador link Sam shared earlier. And I'm done, Sam. There we go. We did it.